an interesting and robust story that I couldn't possibly. So I'm just going to run through some highlights. We've got Lorena Dion McDowell, founder and CEO of Balance Community Advisors, which is a consulting firm dedicated to balancing the strengths of the public, private, and nonprofit sectors in the interest of expanding healthy housing options and in homelessness. Prior to that, she was the founder and director of Wake County's Department of Affordable Housing and Community Revitalization, vice president of programs for the largest human service agency in Northern Virginia. So that's a little bit of these are very impressive. Deputy director in Atlanta under Mayor Qasim Reed, specifically focused on retooling Atlanta's homelessness continuum of care system. Julie White is the Deputy of Multimodal Transportation at the NCDOT, where she oversees rail, aviation, and ferry divisions, as well as the Integrated Mobility Division, which includes public transportation, bicycling, and pedestrian transportation. She chairs the Southeast Rail Corridor Commission, which is leading the effort to develop a high-performance rail system in the Southeast, and serves on the board of directors of the American Public Transportation Association. Keeps going. And we've got Mitchell Silver, award-winning planner of over 40 years of experience. He's a prolific public speaker and strategic advisor specializing in urban planning, parks, placemaking, and implementation strategies. And here it gets really good. He has served as commissioner of New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, principal of planning and design at McAdams, chief planning officer for the city of Raleigh, and professor of practice at UNC's Department of City and Regional Planning. He holds a bachelor's degree from Pratt Institute in Architecture and Regional Planning, Master of Urban Planning from Hunter College, is a fellow in the American Institute of Certified Planners and an honorary member of the American Society of Landscape Architects, the Planning Institute of Australia, and the Royal Town Planning Institute, which sounds like it's in the UK. It is in the UK, sorry. So then we're going to be moderated by Gina Stevens, a media veteran with a deep background in both journalism and sales and an eye for design. She launched Raleigh Magazine in September of 2015 after successfully building both Cary Living and Midtown Magazine. Over the past 10 years, publication has become the go-to voice for covering dining, arts, and local issues, highlighting the diversity and energy of the city. So with that, I believe I hand it over to the panel. Thanks.
One of these things is clearly not like the rest. That would be me. We do have an incredible panel tonight to talk about some of the key issues affecting Raleigh and focus clearly on design and how our city grows and what's next. Just being around them, you get so many ideas, so I think you'll really enjoy this. Okay, so I guess I'm supposed to talk about my image. It's supposed to be of your most recent work, and that is the most recent cover of Raleigh Magazine. People always ask me which is my favorite cover, and I always say the most recent one, and most of the time that's true. But this one is particularly special to me. Anyone in this room probably knows all about it, but it's Loden Development's plan to reimagine the historic train depot and cobblestone parking lot. What I love most about it, it is the perfect mix of preserving Raleigh. Yes, preserving Raleigh's past while bringing the bright, shiny new. And I believe we can be a city that has the perfect blend of that, and we don't have to lose our character. And so I was excited to be able to share this image, and very excited to think that this is going to be a reality at the end of my street on Harrington in the very near future. Julie?
I think mine is next. All right. So we were asked to come up with an image that helped capture something about our work. And the team shared with me that you all get the base of this map as something that you're working with, the 4 quadrants and what you'll be working on over the next couple days. So when I looked at it, it got me thinking about how everything old is new again in terms of transportation. And so we called up our GIS team, and I said, can you lay down for me on this map Raleigh Union Station, the S-Line corridor, the freight rail corridor, the BRT coming to New Bern Avenue, lay down some state roads, and we'll talk about that more, and then the Raleigh streetcar system. Because it really made me think about how cities are going cycles. And I think we're back into thinking about the density of our downtown and how transportation can help us move both around our urban core and then in and out of our urban core. So that's a little bit of a challenge as you're thinking over the next couple of days about solutions, sort of maybe hearkening back a bit to some things we might have done really well in the past. And then I added the state roads part because if you're not from here and you're not embedded in transportation, you may not know what's a little unique about our state is that we don't have county DOTs. The state of North Carolina controls most of the roads in the state. So we're the second largest DOT in the country because if you're driving through a small community in North Carolina down its main street, you are likely driving on one of our roads. And so when you want to change the urban core of a town or a city, you usually have to deal with your state DOT. And while my job is to be the Deputy Secretary for Multimodal, there are 10,000 of us. And so there are lots of people making lots of decisions. And so we might not always be as concerned about the kinds of things that you all might be interested in as vehicle throughput, which tends to be our mainstay. So I wanted to make sure as you think about solutions, you understand where those state roads exist in the Raleigh urban core, because then you have to work with the DOT and you have to do a little more to make that successful.
Very good. All right, so my image is intended to be a little confusing and all over the place. That was intentional, and that's because this work is difficult and it is all over the place. And so in my space, our goal is to address affordable housing and use that to help end homelessness, because at its core, homelessness is a housing problem. That's what it is. If you have a housing system continuum in your community that meets the needs of the people who live in your community, wherever they are, then you do just, surprise, have less homelessness. Yes, there are other things attached to it as well. But if you have those things there, then you will have less homelessness. So that's how we look at things. So when we think about ending homelessness or looking at affordable housing, we look at it as an entire system. And a healthy housing ecosystem has housing all the way from folks who are out on the street, right? All the way up to folks who are living in market value homes. And you have to look at all of those pieces along that system, and how do you catch people whichever direction they're going. So if somebody wants to move up into a more expensive house, you need to have that affordable to them. And did you know that here we have a shortage of housing all the way up into the multi-million-dollar space? So even if somebody wanted to move out of that first-time home buyer situation into a more expensive house, does it even exist for them, right? To get out of the way for the next person to move into that first-time home buyer situation? And then down further along, do you have a system that can catch people as they're falling backwards before they go too far? And so when we look at building systems and building affordable housing for communities, you have to look at it all the way across. So this is an example of a healthy housing ecosystem and how it catches folks and helps move them forward or catches them before they move too far backwards.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Mitchell Silver, former Chief Planning Officer and Planning Director in the city of Raleigh. I first arrived here in 2005. I was recruited from New York because Raleigh was growing fast and they wanted to help develop the city into a 21st century city. So I took on that challenge Immediately we realized that we were growing fast then, we're growing fast now, and back in 2005, we did our long-range plan. We wanted to come up with a blueprint for growth, a growth framework map, because we were going to grow by over 200,000 people during that time frame and add over 100,000 units. Where is it going to go? To say we don't want to grow was not an option. We had to figure it out. So we embarked on this process to create a new comprehensive plan, but the tool that communicated what we wanted to do better than anything else was this growth framework map. We knew we had roughly about 20,000 acres left of greenfield development, and we knew we could not keep building at 4 units to the acre. We would run out of land. And so we came up with this blueprint to communicate to the public using growth centers and corridors of how Raleigh was going to grow. If you're a dark color, the dark brown, you're a growth center. Downtown, West Raleigh, where you see the Novo Center project going. You have Midtown, you have Triangle Town Center and Briar Creek. And then you have these corridors, and we had wanted to see 65% of all new growth to be in those growth centers. And if you were yellow, those are the low-density neighborhoods. This was our way to help organize the city. You'll see those 12 corridors. It could either be for light rail, for bus rapid transit, and that's exactly what happened. This was our attempt to provide a predictable and certain path forward, so as the growth would come, we know where we would urbanize and where we would not. And so when we talk about the next comprehensive plan, which the city is now undertaking, and what's next, my hope is that we will not throw out the baby with the bathwater. The good news is, as we look back, when this is adopted in 2010, 65% of all new growth went to those growth centers. And so this plan worked. And my hope is, as we look to the future to handle the next wave of growth, we'll be as certain and predictable about how we want to entertain new projects, new development, new investments going forward.
So let's get started. So one of the things that our city is facing, as you've spoken about, is the unhoused population. And we've heard lots of terms used that many people don't understand the difference between affordable housing and attainable housing. So can the panel talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective and from my colleagues that work on this nationally, so affordable housing is a term that you use to talk about more of like a unit, right? Like this is an affordable unit. And for it to be affordable, whoever lives in there needs to spend less than 30% of their income on their housing-related costs. So their mortgage or their rent, their light bills, those kinds of things should come to less than 30% of your income. And what's funny is when we say affordable housing in lots of communities, especially when I first got here 7 years ago, that was a no-no word. You know, people looked at that as housing for those people. We heard that a lot, those people, the other people. And so I started doing this thing when I'd have these talks and I have folks pull out their calculators. And I would say, do 30% of your income. Can you remember that number? Then add up all your housing-related costs and see if that number is less than 30% of your income. And you can see how many faces in that room thought they weren't one of those people. And then realized when they did the calculation, oops. So my point is that affordable housing is for everyone. Everyone should have housing they can afford. You should spend less than 30% of your income. Housing affordability, however, is a system, is a spectrum, an ecosystem of housing. That was the chart, the little picture that I had up there. That's looking at the whole system. And then really sustainability is another term you hear about sustainable housing, as that is once you get it, can you hold on to it? Can you keep it given the cost of everything else around you? Does it remain affordable to you? Is it sustainable for you to stay there? That's our perspective.
Well, thank you, Lorraine. I just want to add a little bit to that conversation. When you hear affordable, as Lorena said, is tied to a program, a formula. You know, affordable median, AMI, the area median income. It has all certain qualifications. Attainable is that people don't want to be part of a program, but there's housing they want to purchase. The challenge we're having is when you're a hot real estate market like Raleigh or the Triangle, it's very difficult to attain housing because private property owners control the price of the home, not government. Anyone in this room, if you have a home for sale, and let me ask this question. If your home was worth $500,000 and someone said, I will give you $650,000 cash, you'll probably say, no, thank you, I'll take the $500,000. Would you do that? No, you wouldn't. You take the highest price. What happens as people move into our market, particularly during COVID, during that period, housing prices went up. Median home prices went up during COVID over $100,000. Government did nothing. Individual homeowners realized they can get top dollar, and as you see the median price go higher, a lot of people in this room can't afford to buy, and it also translates to the rental market. That's one conversation we don't often have. The question is, how can government intervene to provide housing that is more attainable or affordable, streamlining regulations, building smaller homes? Jen Truman's in the back, very focused on smaller cottage homes that are more affordable. There are things you can do to make housing more attainable, but desirable markets will always have an affordability problem. That's something we have to understand. And how does the public and private sector partner together to make housing more attainable so people could actually afford to buy a place in Raleigh and not drive 30, 40, 50 minutes to drive until they qualify for a home?
I want to add one thing to that too, because you tapped on how it affects the rental market. It affects it directly because the cost to buy that building was more for that owner, and that goes to the rent. But, in really, amazing markets like we have here, those owners or those rental units can also do other things, like require you to make 3.5 times the rent. It's no longer attainable. Even if you have the income, or even if you can afford it monthly, do you make 3.5 times the rent? If not, it's not attainable to you, right? Do you have a perfect rental history? Because these owners have sort of the pick of the litter right now. There is a 67,000 unit shortage here in just Wake County alone of affordable units. So, they kind of can pick and choose who their renters are. When you're in a market this hot, it makes it really hard to make it attainable, even if you can afford that monthly mortgage. You almost have to be a perfect renter to get into a lot of these units, and that's very difficult. And the last thing that I want to add to kind of what you said is the fact that government doesn't control and can't control. There are significant limitations here in North Carolina that other states don't have. Like, did you know that inclusionary zoning is illegal in North Carolina? You cannot require affordable housing to be developed. I don't know how many times I would sit in rooms, especially when I was the director at Wake County, and folks would come to me after spending months and months of planning. They would come and say, Director McDowell, we have it. We have the solution, and we're going to tell you how you can fix this problem. You just need to require that developers build affordable housing. And it would be devastating for them. They spend so much time and energy and real passion to help, just to come in and hear in one sentence, that's illegal in North Carolina. That all that time was for naught, right? And so we have to be very creative on how we address the solution, because we can't require it in a lot of ways legally here by state statute.
So is it realistic? I lived in Atlanta, and I was a baby right out of college, and I had to live 15 miles, 20 miles from downtown from the TV station I worked at because I couldn't afford it. We hear a lot of conversation about making our, downtown affordable for service industry. I'm not disagreeing, but is that a realistic expectation when you think about places like Buckhead in Atlanta or the 606 Trail in Chicago? Is it a reasonable expectation as we grow into a larger city?
So I was in Atlanta too, so I want to comment. Then I really want to hand it to my colleague, because I feel like you could add something to this conversation where transit is concerned, for sure. But I will say that in Atlanta, that was very idealistic of them when they built that area. And the reason why I had to come in 2012 and redo their whole homeless service system is because they had built this amazing area in Buckhead and all that, and they focused on folks who are going to bring in more income, high earners, and didn't compute in there the folks who lived there before still wanted to live in their community and didn't just leave, and then they became homeless. And then when I got there in 2012, there were more than 6,000 people on the street in just the city of Atlanta proper, and that is not a big geographic footprint. So they were pushed out. And they didn't think about creating spaces outside of just one transit line in MARTA where folks could live even further out where they could afford without it being very difficult. And their transit, they've got more transit than we have here, but I think my colleague can speak to that.
So, and Mitchell talked about the idea largely in this region is affordable is obtained by driving further. So a lot of people would like to live closer to where they work or where their services are, but to find affordable housing, drive quite a distance. So at the DOT, right over down here in downtown in our building, I know a host of our administrative assistants who live in Franklinton, who live in Vance County, and who drive at, call it 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half on a rough day, down Capitol Boulevard to come to work every day. The cost of owning and maintaining a vehicle is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $10,000 a year. So they pay to park downtown, they pay to maintain that vehicle that they're putting an extraordinary amount of miles on, and that's how they found their affordable housing. As we keep growing, as we all know, we're growing exponentially, there is a time at which that commute will no longer be possible, right? That commute's only going to get more and more congested. What could change that is transit. So whether it's a bus rapid transit with a dedicated lane, so you're guaranteeing the travel time, or a rail opportunity, so our S line that's going to go from Raleigh north up to the state line. If we were able to build the leg from Raleigh to Wake Forest today, you could do that commute in 21 minutes door to door. You could never drive Wake Forest to Raleigh at commuting times in 21 minutes. And while the drive will get longer, that rail will always be 21 minutes. So we think that transit is a really interesting way if you can't live in the urban core. Transit might be a way to expand how far you can live to find that more affordable housing. There's another area, and I'm going to challenge my brain here, but it's like the Atlantic Avenue area where we envision a future rail stop.
I was going to say the Ironworks district.
No, further out. It's where we have a DMV office, if you've gone to the DMV, and we're not going to talk about that tonight. But if you've been there, you know that it's in a strip mall that's largely underdeveloped. It's a huge piece of property. I feel like that is such an affordable housing opportunity. If we can make there's the train. If we can make a rail stop happen there, then, and there's all this property that's really undervalued right now, underutilized, what kind of really cool, affordable housing opportunity might that present for folks who can then still get into the downtown super quick? So I think thinking about how to expand our urban footprint through transit could be interesting.
Well, first, I'm going to go back to this framework a second because I agree with everything that you've said, but I do want to make one qualification. We often say affordable housing, but I believe we need to have quality neighborhoods that are connected to goods and services and transit. I don't know if downtown should be the location for people that looking for attainable housing. This growth center had 8 places throughout the city that are connected to transit. You probably can't see it, but those circles, that was envisioned back then as light rail stations that would be able to, people can travel throughout the region, find a place that they can afford without owning a car, but they're also connected to all these services. They can walk. For example, the Village District, we urbanized all around the Village District, and people said it'll increase traffic. No, it didn't, because all those trips are captured, because rather than driving for services, they walked across the street to enjoy all those retail and restaurants without ever getting out of the car. So to me, it should be about quality neighborhoods connected to transit. This is bus rapid transit, this is light rail. Could you imagine, because I grew up in New York and lived in New Jersey, that if we had a train that went from downtown Raleigh to Goldsboro, that would open up an entire affordable housing region, and it's maybe, 40 minutes on a train. It opens up so many possibilities, and so the importance of transportation and affordability, but also livable neighborhoods, to me is absolutely important. Driving is a very expensive proposition, so I think as we look for what's next, we have to start looking at land use, transportation connection to make sure we're giving people options than just driving to find a place they can afford. Because in the New York Metro, you lived in New Jersey, that's where you took the New Jersey Transit to come in. Some people went as far as Philadelphia to take the train. You didn't have to drive, it was affordable, and I think that's what we should be looking for the next evolution in this region.
Switching gears just a little bit, neighbors fought vigorously to prevent the reimagination of North Hills to what it is today, and no one could argue that what Kane Realty's North Hills has been is transformative for the city. Should we be more development friendly? If not, how does Raleigh continue to grow and thrive?
I'm going to be somewhat controversial to anybody who's seen any of my titles, and it's like affordable housing, and they're like, you should hate developers. And I'm like, no, we need them to build, and a lot. I think that we need to do a better job of engaging developers. I think we need to do a better job of educating developers and helping them to understand that there is money to be made on the affordable side, and it's significant, quite frankly, right? And it's funny because since you mentioned Kane's property, I had a conversation with John a few years ago, and I had been in my role for Wake maybe 3-4 years. And, you know, I think a lot of people painted him as like, oh, this big developer, you know, awful guy. And I get that he was, you know, developing in an area people didn't want it. But do you know that nobody actually asked him to do affordable housing? I just asked for a meeting and sat down with him, and he was like, yeah, you know, I have all these conversations with the folks of the city, and they just kind of want to nickel and dime me on each project. Why don't they just make me do affordable across the board? And I was like, oh, you mean inclusionary zoning? Would you like to come to the state with me and have a conversation? Right? And he's like, I'd go. You know, so the funny thing is, like, no one even tried. No one had that. They just made an assumption and assumed he wouldn't be a part of the solution. And he's actually open to a conversation, is currently having conversations with Wake County about it. So I just think that, you know, we understand how people feel a certain way about developers, and there are some who could care less, but there are some who do want to do good. And if we do a good job of, you know, approaching them, educating them, we can get them to understand the importance of affordable housing and to see that the pro forma actually works out really well in their, you know, on their side anyways. So.
Well, first, we often talk about public-private partnerships and working with a builder. I don't always want to say developer because a lot of people go for an entitlement and then sell it. But if we want to pursue public-private partnerships, doing projects like North Hills is public and private. We do the framework, we plan it through a comprehensive plan, and we zone it. And then we expect the development community, the real estate community, the builders, to build what we ask them to do. We do the policy part, they do the building part. But the minute they're saying, okay, we're coming in for the application to do exactly what you want us to do, oh no, you're being greedy. You're hurting our market, too much traffic, too much water, too much, wait a second, I'm following your blueprint. You asked me to help fulfill this growth framework map, and now you're saying, oh, no. So I think we have to understand the importance of public-private partnerships. We set policy, we set plans, then the real estate community comes in to help realize those plans. That's number one. Number two, learn this term, especially students. There's a term in placemaking called the power of 10. Every great city needs to have 10 destinations with 10 things to do at each destination. That's what makes a city vibrant, the experience of downtown, of midtown, of West Raleigh. To me, it is good because it provides and offers another destination that's different than downtown. You go to Ironworks, different experience. You go to Briar Creek, different experience. You go to Triangle Town Center. Okay, they need help. I wish I could reach out. Do you all know Triangle Town Center? I went for a walking tour and never seen so many vacancies in one mall, but that's an experience. So the point is that it's good to give people choices, and beyond that, our region's fantastic. You can go to downtown Durham, you can go to Fenton. These are experiences people are craving, and from my perspective, to have a mixed-use district like a Midtown reduces traffic because people are now walking to those experiences versus driving from one building to the other. So for me, a healthy North Hills is good for the city. A downtown is good for the city, and all those growth centers are good for the city. So I'm excited to see how it's going to evolve in the future. If you saw from what it was 30 years ago, you'd be shocked. It was just an aged out, dead, dying shopping center, and now it is not the heart, but one of the hearts of Raleigh, and I'm very excited to see what the next version is going to look like.
Hey, Julie, before you start,
Sure.
I think one of the hot issues, we posted this and had hundreds, if not thousands, of comments about this potential rezoning, the rezoning they're going to file. And every comment was directly related to Six Forks Road and traffic, and that we're not moving forward with the expanding. Can you talk a little bit about, if we can't do that, what do we do?
Sure. So I'm going to pick up on a couple things on this one. So what I think Kane's development demonstrated, and I think he was really ahead of his time when he came up with the concept, was the concept of mixed use. And so the neighborhood was fighting the announcement. When he first announced he was going to come in and redo the mall, the neighborhood largely fought him and didn't like it. And we read about it in the paper. My husband and I, we were living out in East Raleigh, and we thought, that sounds really great. the idea that we could walk to all those things in one place, to live in a Raleigh where that really wasn't something you could find, something that dense and take advantage. So we bought a house in the neighborhood because everybody put their house on the market. And 3 years later, we put a for sale by owner sign in the neighborhood because we needed a bigger house. We had a couple kids and we couldn't afford to stay in the neighborhood, but we made a really good investment, it turns out, 3 years later. So I've actually gone to John Kane and thanked him for putting my family on its first sound financial ground. Appreciated that. But I think what he demonstrated was that is a very desirable development. What's missing that would have made it even better, it's transit-oriented development without the transit. That's the missing piece. If we had a rail stop there, wow, would that have really added to how many people were getting there to walk around without the cars. So I live, in the neighborhood off Six Forks. I'm keenly aware of the traffic there. And I think that's something that we're wrestling with because it came without the transit. So as we think about other areas to develop, I think we need to think about how does transit get built into these mixed-use dense developments to make sure that we're allowing people to get to them if they're not already living there without having to bring a vehicle.
Dix Park is and will be probably the crown jewel of our city. It is driving growth in areas never touched before, and it will definitely boost tourism city and statewide. Dix needs to be connected to downtown. How do we do it? And will it take years and years and years?
Gina, I'm so happy you asked that question. There was a magazine article, issue where you asked for big ideas. And I had recommended, although it was a big idea, that we demolish the Martin Luther King South Saunders interchange and replace it with a way of walking from the convention center directly to Dix in under 10 minutes. That's a bold move. We're going to need Julie's help with you for the NCDOT to agree to demolish that interchange, which is serving no purpose back from the days of urban renewal. I'm not putting you on the spot, Julie. But the whole thing is that we need to put out a design competition and get this done. We've been talking and talking and talking. We need a connection from downtown to Dix. And I think that we have to start moving forward. People talked about a gondola, a high line. To me, an at-grade crossing will not work because there's not an experience that's conducive to walking. But to me, that was one option of whether we can, that's a long-term option of demolishing it. But we do have to be committed to finding access to Dix, and that's something that has to be a high priority on the council's list. We've been talking about it. It's time to get it done.
Anyone have anything to add? All in agreement. I was recently introduced to 2 affordable housing projects. One was a tiny homes created by a 3D printer in Wilmington. Loved it. Got the cost of building these houses down from $80,000 to $40,000 with a 3D printer. The other is a shipping container community in Atlanta, both designed to help remove the unhoused from city streets. Are we being as creative as we could be? Not saying we're not, just asking. Are there things that we could be doing that are alternative plans like that? Those both one of those took 90 to 180 days to build.
Yeah.
I mean, that's astonishing and not a lot of money.
The project in Atlanta is near and dear to my heart, although I didn't work on that project. The nonprofit that we raised back in 2016 when it finally launched is the one that launched that shipping container community in Atlanta. And what that speaks to is when you have a good, what we call continuum of care, which is in every community geographic space that addresses homelessness in that area. Here, it's called NC 507, and it is the geographic boundary of Wake County. And the reason why I mentioned that is because in Atlanta, that transformation you're seeing and that intentional design built to help folks who are coming from unhoused and helping to build their skills and then become housed beyond that is because they had a continuum of care lead that was built in a way to serve the community properly. We did not have that here for a very long time. The continuum of care lead here for many years was struggling, and a couple of years ago it went completely under. So if you didn't know why you're seeing an increase of folks who aren't able to access services, it really is because our system completely broke down a couple of years ago. And folks thought that Wake County as a government led those efforts. It wasn't. It was a completely separate nonprofit entity selected by the community many, many years ago and blessed by HUD to do that for this geographic area, NC 507. Last year, the community voted for Wake County government to take it all over and rebuild. And so your county is right now rebuilding the NC 507 homeless service system. So this is a great opportunity for anyone who wants to get involved in how we address homelessness in Wake County, because they just hired a director, they've hired 9 new positions, they're completely relaunching. And so I think that what they're going to build will be able to provide a platform for those creative ideas to come here. We just didn't have a homeless service system and leadership that was able to really do that before.
I do believe we need more innovation and creativity. I don't know whether the 3D printed home meets the building code of the state, but it's something we should explore to see if there could be an exception. There's also new technology that's also being released, and these are like Lego blocks. They're insulated blocks that can be stacked, and you can build a home in less than 30 days. The question is, does our building codes allow for it? But to me, we're in a crisis, so every solution should be on the table. My last point is, as we look for land and where we can place this, I do want to make sure that these places are designed that provide livability. I've seen projects in California and they're lined up like huts. It seems like an institution, concentration camp. And if we are going to design these places with smaller homes, we have to think of the site planning in mind to design this for people and not just to be housed, as I said earlier. Make this a livable place with adequate open spaces and separations and public spaces so people really feel like it's a home and not just a unit where they go in and sleep and leave in the morning. But I'm certainly open to that level of innovation, creativity, and see whether the North Carolina building codes will allow us to do it. But we're in a crisis, so I think everything should be on the table.
And finally, how do you measure the success of an urban planning project? I mean, it's easy for all of us to have opinions.
Why are you handing it to me?
But it covers all 3 of you.
It's a tough question. It's a tough question because it's based on someone's judgment, and all of us have different. Like when I was plan director and we started to urbanize, people said, I don't want to live downtown. I only go downtown to visit someone in prison or pay a parking ticket. I don't want to live downtown. So it's generational. So it's hard to say, but I'd have to say Raleigh has been pretty good. If you look at Fayetteville Street, which was closed, it was a mall. Someone said you can leave $1 there Friday night. You come back Monday morning and it's still there. I mean, nobody went there. You look at the emergence of North Hills and all those other places. And so I have to say a successful urban project is one that people want to go to. I mean, Fenton, in the middle of nowhere in Cary, is highly successful. And so to me, it's the reaction you get. It's the experience, and you want to go back again and again and again. To me, that would be my opinion of a successful urban planning project. It's one that is a people attractor, and it has 3 important ingredients: fun, joy, and happiness. And if that is the payback you get from a place, to me, it's a successful urban planning project.
Yes to all of that. And I would add, does that urban planning project include space for the people who have historically lived there, grown there, built community there? Can they afford to stay there as well? Because I believe that we should all have choice of where we live, regardless of our income. And if you build something new and it pushes the people out of the communities that they know and away from the friends and family they have, it makes all things else difficult for them. We were talking about, daycare. A lot of times in the communities that are the ones that get redeveloped are folks who don't use traditional daycare. Their cousin watches their kids down the street or whatever, and now when they get priced out, now not only do they lose their home, but their childcare, right? So does it include spaces for that? Does it ensure that we're not pushing more people into unsafe spaces like the street. And I would be remiss if I didn't add this, since I have you all captive here, that on July 24th, our federal government published an executive order that seeks to criminalize and institutionalize homelessness. So time is of the essence for us to address this issue here and nationally.
So from a transportation perspective, I think it's a really important question as to how people do define that. So a lot of our projects are considered successful if cars move quicker, right? So congestion is a metric that's usually used in transportation. And so you can make cars go faster by syncing up all the red lights or the green lights, right? So that folks can go, you can post at faster speeds. You can make the road wider and flatter. There are all kinds of ways we can do that. And at the same time, that might make that road less safe for other users of the road, for the pedestrians or the bicyclists or the people crossing the roads or what have you. So I think to Mitchell's point about everybody defines it differently, I think we're at a really important conversation point about what is the shared metric that we all use. And how do we figure out what that is and what that balance of those things are? Because different spaces, to Mitchell's point, look different. So, in one of those nodes, like in a downtown, you might want a slower speed limit, so because more people walk in the downtown. So we need safer roads in the downtown. And, somewhere with limited access that's further out of the city, you can have higher speeds because there's going to be fewer people walking. So I think it's an important conversation to have right now about where is it the right set of metrics for the different areas.
I think we're going to open it up to the group for questions. So someone's coming to get my mic. So if you've got a question, please ask.
All the students have questions, I can tell.
First of all, can we get a round of applause and thank you for their time tonight? So yeah, we've got about 15 minutes for questions, so I will go. I'm going to try to bounce from one side to the other, so if someone wants to lead us off, all right, I see a hand there. This side, be ready.
Hey, my name is Aaron Thaddeus. My question's really simple. I know we talked about a lot of broad, very important topics. I had one question. So I moved here about 9 years ago, and I didn't understand this traffic idea where you can turn right and you can cross at the same time, like you can walk across the road. I didn't quite understand it. I've never seen it in any other country. Could you please help me understand why that is so? Why?
So first thing to say, I am not a traffic engineer. I am not an engineer. Great question. So in the downtown, here in downtown Raleigh, they recently went with the no right turn on red. So if you're not familiar, we were having, particularly in COVID, when more people were out walking, we were having a lot more pedestrians being hit in the downtown core. State employees out at lunch, people who are living downtown, people were just spending more time out and about. And so a work group got together and was formed to talk about what was happening in downtown and what could we do about it. And one of the outcomes of that was no right turn on red. So slows traffic, means you enter and leave the downtown slower, but it means the pedestrians are safer, so trade-off. I think we're seeing a lot more of those kind of conversations. Another big thing the DOT has done of late is outside of the downtown urban core, but four-way stops. So a big area where we're having issues is in rural roads where folks are driving 45, 55 miles an hour and we're seeing T-bone crashes, right? It was a two-way stop. You look both ways. You didn't see the car. You pull out in your T-bone. So a trade-off was these four-way stops. And it has been an incredibly affordable traffic treatment that has resulted in an incredible reduction in crashes. There's all kinds of research we're doing of what is the particular challenge and what is the hopefully cheap, quick solution that we can do. And there's a lot of these going into our downtowns now. So I think it's a great question, but we are working toward it.
I'm Suzanne Botts. I live in Boylan Heights, and there's a great bus line there, but the ridership is really down after now, not with the hot weather because people are riding the bus and plugging in their phones. But do you think there's hope for light rail? I mean, people still are not wanting to give up their cars. There's no place to park. It's expensive to park.
So I think for the moment, I don't think there's an effort to advance light rail. There's a number of challenges for it, but in the meantime, I think the bus rapid transit is, a really exciting project going out New Bern Avenue. It'll be our very first one in the state. So we're working really closely with the city to help that project be a success. Unlike most states, that's a state road with a City of Raleigh project and a city bus system. So it's a really exciting opportunity for partnership. And that's just the first in the queue of a number of them happening statewide. So it's a cheaper investment. It can respond as things change because you haven't put the track in the ground. So I think that's an exciting opportunity. And then our intercity passenger rail. North Carolina is somewhat unique as a state in that we don't really have one urban core that everybody drives into and then everybody drives out of, right? We've got Durham, Chapel Hill, Raleigh, Goldsboro, Wake Forest. We go all different directions in every region in the state. And so intercity rail is about connecting the centers of different communities. And since we travel more uniquely like that, we think intercity rail has a real opportunity to play. We currently run the train between Raleigh and Charlotte. And then we run one Charlotte, Raleigh to New York each day. And we're experiencing record ridership year over year since 2019. More people are using it to get between communities. And so we actually just wrapped up a public comment period, hearing where else people want to go, what times they want to see the trains. We have a vision of connecting the whole state by rail. If you have a chance to check out on our website, Mitchell mentioned Goldsboro. We've got a line we're exploring down to Wilmington through Goldsboro. We got a line going Salisbury out to Asheville. We want to run the line north more direct to DC. When we build that line out, you'll be able to get Raleigh to DC in 4 hours. You cannot do that in a car right now. So why would you ever drive to DC again? So we think that is a different way to approach one of the challenges.
One of the biggest disappointments of the growth framework map was built on a light rail system. And when I left in 2014, I heard that plan was falling apart. I'm still holding out hope. Every time I go to Charlotte, I just take out a handkerchief and crying, and it could have been Raleigh. What a shaper of land use. And I understand the realities that it's going to be very difficult to do in the short term, but I want to start a conversation to get it back in conversation about the long term. We just came back from an intercity trip in Kansas City, and I listened very carefully how bold Kansas City was, not just using bond money, but they use all sorts of different revenues from utilities, some federal money, because they said we had to get it done. For them, BRT was not an option. They wanted to go with light rail. And so I listened very carefully about their desire, the importance of having a light rail system. It was more of a streetcar than a light rail, but still they got it done. We were able to see it. So in the near term, I don't think there's any hope. I think the federal climate would not support investment in light rail, but we have the framework. It was built to accommodate light rail, and so I think we should start that conversation, because anytime you think you need light rail, you're 10 years too late. So I think we need to start that conversation.
Hi. I know that Raleigh has a lot of incentive programs for affordable housing, specifically with the transit overlay districts and adding height to buildings if they include affordable housing. Have you seen any projects come out of that, or does it go back to more a question of building code and needing to reform building code to allow for more flexibility in how we build to make things more affordable to build?
That's a great question. It's both. So we do need to look at code. We do need to look at density. We do need to look at all of the permitting processes, all those things that we do to actually build housing, full stop, and specifically affordable housing, because unless you incentivize it, you're probably not going to get it, because again, we can't require it here. But across the city of Raleigh and Wake County as a whole, which also the county government does also fund within the city of Raleigh, there have been thousands and thousands of units of affordable housing. I don't know the city's specific metric because I came from working for the county, but I know the county has over 7,000 units either developed or in development right now that are specifically earmarked for affordable housing. So those are 7,000 units within larger projects, right? And so the thing about affordable housing that makes it difficult is that you don't see it today. You won't see it for a few years because it takes years to build it. And then by then, we're growing so fast that it feels like nothing's happening. But there are 7,000 units in the last 5 years that have been created because they've been incentivizing it in dollars, putting money into units. They have also been looking at code. The other thing, too, that I think gets forgotten is that we have to look at our current owners, right? So my company recently was working with a client who works in 4 counties, right? And we did some research on the age of how the housing stock here, and a significant portion of the apartments that are used for rentership here are hitting their 30-year mark, like now, because of previous incentives, tax incentives, that 30 years they released some of their affordability requirements. And so now we have to also be thinking about how do we engage with folks who aren't building new, but how do we make sure all those units aren't lost? Because if we lose all that naturally occurring affordable housing now, we're going to be in worse place 5 years from now than we were now, even though we've put 7,000, 8,000, 10 more units in. So it is looking at the code. It is making sure that we're making a space that makes it easier to do and requiring affordable housing in the ways that we can. It is incentivizing it with cash with new development, but it's also looking at your current stock and figuring out how you can make sure that you hold on to those units as well.
The only thing I'd add, you mentioned incentivizing from density bonuses, so to speak. A few have been approved. I don't think any have been built. And for those projects where there were conditions to a bill of affordable housing, 0 was built. So I do agree we have to look at few approaches. The city of Raleigh does offer GAMP financing. We acquire land. We support affordable housing in that way. If we have site control, the DMV site is going to have some affordable housing, a site next to Moore Square, but that's something we control. But there are projects that got a bonus, they've been entitled, but to my knowledge, they haven't been built yet. So it is something we should explore, but I do agree, very often you go in and you start getting condition after condition, it starts to increase the cost that makes it not affordable. So that's something I think the city council is looking at very closely as they look at these zoning cases.
But that's why you pair the requirements with money. Right, like you pair it with also incentivizing to buy down the cost of that. It's like you can't do one without the other. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I just want to thank you for this conversation. I'm curious, one of the things that I've heard sort of implicitly in this conversation about density and transportation is issues of climate change, sustainability. We've seen our neighbors get inundated with flooding today. I don't know if anyone went outside. It wasn't fun. It was brutal. I'm curious how you all are situating sort of climate change, whatever words you want to use, in your own work personally, but also publicly in terms of the conversations that we're having today.
So I don't have any work locally. My firm doesn't have work locally on that specifically, but in some other states right now, we're having, like in California, we're having really good conversations around this right now. And really what we're trying to do is help people think outside of just like building a unit that looks affordable. But if the cost to keep that unit cool because of how hot it is too expensive for that person to pay that bill, then even though the rent seems affordable, that space is not affordable to them. So we're having conversations on building more eco-friendly, but also, just ways to keep the, in general, cost down. Also looking at things about like, how do we create other kinds of like community spaces that just by its nature make it more affordable to live in them. So like we're talking about like farming and things, building in like natural green spaces into what people would look at affordable housing and they would assume, well, why would you want to put that there? That's inexpensive. But if it helps that the people there can use the food that is farmed there, then the unit becomes, so just thinking more than just a unit and really about like the other costs that that family or that household has, and that is tied really closely to what's happening in the environment around us.
I don't know if you heard in the intro, but I served as Commissioner for Parks of New York City. And one of the things that we were able to do, I was able to do as commissioner, is we use our parks and public spaces as a first line of defense against climate change. Storm surge, heat island, planting more trees, clean air, clean water. It was a major focus. A lot of major sites had stormwater retention in our parks so that we would not increase flooding in the communities. So I always look at parks and public spaces as one way of addressing climate change because it is the first line of defense. You know, we are going to advocate for planting of more trees, even though there seems to be a lot of trees here, but I still believe we have lollipop miniature street trees and they need to be a lot more championed to provide more shade. Right now they seem to be more ornamental because we have to make sure it doesn't affect the utility lines, but that's just a pet peeve I have. But beyond that, I think builders understand the importance of building better projects that are more sustainable. We all know that storms and flooding events are becoming more frequent and unpredictable. It's going to be very difficult to say we can engineer our way out of it because these storms are now 500-year storms that we're seeing ravaging the entire country, including what happened here just a couple of weeks ago. So it's something that we're paying attention to. Each approach may be different. And so we recognize the role of government is protect public health, safety, and welfare. And I do see climate change as the biggest threat facing us in the future of this city and this entire planet. And so it's something I know that we're taking very seriously. I was able to actually do something using parks. And then, you know, I think that's still an opportunity here, not just in Raleigh, but in the whole triangle.
So from my perspective as the multimodal person in DOT, anything we do to get somebody out of their car helps, you know, contribute to the long-term sustainability. So every time we work to build another rail line or we make transit more accessible and we have less friction, I'll give you a great example. I am a big evangelist for microtransit. In the state of North Carolina, we have roughly 544 cities, most of which are under 25,000 in population. And so they are not going to have fixed route systems as part of their solution. They just don't have the density or the size. But they still have people who need to get around without a vehicle or would like to get around without a vehicle. So microtransit is basically if you're in a community, a smaller community that doesn't have Uber because it's too small, it's like publicly subsidized Uber. So you get an app, you call the public transit on your phone. Wilson introduced the first one in partnership with us. It was called Wilson Ride. They do it with like minivans, Toyota Sienna minivans. You call it up. If for the same price you would have gotten on a bus, you know, $1.25 initially, you're going to get in that Uber, and the city is going to pay the remainder of that fare, and it's going to take you from, if you are ADA, it's going to take you from where you called for that ride to where you need to go. But if you're not, maybe you're going to walk a block to a virtual bus stop. And then get your ride to where you need to go. I think getting more people to use transit is about making it less difficult, making it easier, making it meet people's expectations, having less friction in the system. So apps is how we all do everything these days. So your ride should come and it should be paid online electronically and it should be car competitive time-wise. So I think, you know, we're thinking about how do we get people out of their vehicles, we give them more solutions that they take advantage of, and then there's less folks driving around in cars.
Hi. I just have a question about, it sounds like you want to densify in Raleigh and get people out of their cars and have more green spaces and have more shade. And I guess I'm a visitor here, and as a first impression, I'm very aware of like how wide the roads are, how much paved surface there is, and how much of that is not shaded and is not built on. And I wondered, is there any scope for building on some of that road space? And if there's kind of regulations of how much space is needed for cars, could then there be new streets within that road space that are just for pedestrians or just for cyclists or just for public transit? Is there room for thinking about that?
Great question. I haven't looked at the statistic lately. Mitchell, remind me, last time I looked, 56 people a day moved to Wake County? 56 people a day move here. And so when we think about how we accommodate all of those people, taking a traffic lane out is probably not one of the solutions, right? 56 people a day. So I think the question...
But if you want people to use public transit, then you don't need to provide the road space. Maybe.
So what we are doing is talking about how do we, for like the BRT example, how do we add the bus rapid transit lane so that it can have its own dedicated lane, which means it's quicker, it means it can be car competitive or better than the car, and then how do we create the density of which transit systems succeed? If we're still living a quarter acre per house, transit isn't going to work. My daughter went to DC for college. She was there 2 weeks, and as part of her college, she gets the public transit pass. And she called me after 2 weeks and she said, "Mom, this is spectacular. I can go anywhere in the city. I can get there quick. I don't have to have a car. Why don't we have this in Raleigh?" I was like, "Oh, what a wonderful learning opportunity. Sit down, honey, we're gonna talk." And I said, how many acres do we live on? You know, how would transit work if we all live, you know, half-acre lots? So transit's success is largely dependent on the land use and zoning and the density to be successful. So I think we've got to marry those things together, and maybe we won't have to do as many road widenings as we would have done otherwise.
Real quick, the other thing too here is that, and I think this is a general comment for this city, as a person who wasn't from here and came here 7 years ago from other larger cities that had already experienced this growth, I think we were in denial. We were in denial. There are a lot of folks who are like, we don't want to grow and we can fight it. And it was like, no, I think to your earlier point, it was coming regardless. And so I think we're a little behind the dime, right? Like if we would have accepted this, 10 years ago, that this was an inevitability and it was coming and the growth was going to happen, we started building the transit, then we wouldn't be widening the roads that we're widening by my house in Wake Forest right now. Instead, we'd be having, smaller roads and more lane for development. So I think we're having kind of an awakening here in this community where we're like, all right, it's coming, it's here, we can't fight it, now what do we have to do? And now we got to figure out transit. And, we're just a little late.
I have a question. Where are you visiting from? London. So I grew up in New York, and most people in my family don't even own a car. Some don't even have a driver's license because the transit system is so robust that it makes more sense to use it than to drive a car. Raleigh wasn't built that way. Other than the small downtown core, it was basically built in a sprawled manner based on an automobile. The concern I have with what you're saying is that it will take us a long time to be transit friendly. First, you have to walk from your house to the bus stop. There aren't sidewalks everywhere. Then when you get to the sidewalk, it may have a shelter or it may not. So you'll have to stand there in the rain or hot sun and no seat. Then you may have to wait 45 minutes to an hour for that bus service. People would rather just drive, take Uber or find alternative. We're not there yet. We're trying to expand the transit system through micromobility. You'll see the scooters downtown and the e-bikes. But it's going to take some time to get there as Raleigh adds more bike lanes and more options. But growing in New York or London or Philadelphia or DC, those are places that are pedestrian friendly, and that is just the nature of how our city developed. The cities you're talking about came of age in the 16th, 17th century, New York, 18th, 19th century. Raleigh came of age in the 21st century. And the road network was set, and now we're trying to retrofit. And so that's the challenge that we have.
I think, I can totally see that. It's a very, very different context. I guess it's just a time that it sounds like things are trying to be rethought. And I come from a practice where there's scope for temporary interventions to test things out. And I could imagine the way you're discussing things of like wanting to have areas where there's mixed use and things going on, and even if there is an experiment where there's one street and half of it is given over to another use that isn't driving, and then seeing what effect that has and how people engage with that could be quite interesting.
Well, we want you to move from London to move here. We need your energy and
I'm
aspiration, and so we'll be looking for you to help move the needle.
Thank you. My question relates to affordable housing and equitable housing. And I'd like you to try to address in some ways subsidized, size, quality, and location, because it seems like there have to be trade-offs. You know, you can't give a single mother who's a teacher, a studio apartment in a nice place downtown and expect her to live there because it's close to her school, but raise a child in a, 100 square foot studio or 200 square foot studio apartment. So how do you balance subsidy, size, quality, location, and make affordable housing equitable housing?
It's a really, really good question. And it's really difficult, doable. And I'm going to also lean on what I said earlier, which is we're behind. We're late here. When I got here 7 years ago and Wake County wanted to build the affordable housing department, I cannot tell you how many conversations I was in where people told me, that's crazy, we don't need that, that's a City of Raleigh issue, it's nobody else. So let the city deal with that, right? And then I was like, Chicken Little, because I'm like, not only do you have an affordability issue, you have a crisis. Like, that's we're not even gonna have that discussion. And also you're on the verge of a homelessness crisis. And they were like, you're really crazy, lady. And I'm like, all right, whatever, and now you see what's happening. All to say is that those are the conversations happening now. They should have happened 20 years ago, in my opinion. But it can be done. I firmly believe, and I'll speak for myself in this, in choice. I think people should be able to choose where they want to live, what size of unit they need, and all of that. I do think your local governments are trying to address that now. They are using incentivizing dollars, Wake County tax dollars, City of Raleigh tax dollars, Town of Cary. Now, actually, I think of the 12 municipalities, 9 have affordable housing plans now that speak to having a stock that is more robust and more representative of what the community needs. Does it exist right now? Nope, and that's because we're late. Those units are the things that are being built now. So in the next few years, you'll see more diversity in types of stock and in location and more choice. But we are, in essence, just really late, and it's still not enough. And with all the thousands of units being built, it's not enough because we are growing by 56 people a day approximately. And that, just for the record, isn't just people moving in. That takes into account people moving out and death. That's the net growth per day. So all to say is that great question. It does need to be addressed. I do know those conversations are happening right now and have been for the last few years. You just don't see it yet because we're late.
Happy Monday, y'all. It's another amazing day in paradise. My superhero name is Mama Kai because I found my superpowers being the mom and student of a young black male superhero. I just let people know that because it's important in the context of what I'm speaking on. I hear all these things, and I consider me in my YB MS, right, the Raleigh's most famous unhoused people. I served on the homelessness task force. So I've been in a lot of places listening to a lot of things. And while I appreciate Lorena saying that we're behind, really Raleigh is backwards in a lot of things that they've done. And one of the things that standing here kind of bothers me is that we had a young black female who was serving on council, who is very environmentally, she was under 30, she turned 30 in her second year of service, who really struggled with her role on council because she was attacked on so many different levels for being a black woman trying to serve our city. And she was replaced in this last election. And so we had the representation there. We had people there who were speaking to a lot of these issues. As far as the question that this young lady, our friend from London, was talking about, check out the Real Matters from previous years because they have 2 projects that address just that, taking down the road, making it more pedestrian and neighborhood friendly. There's 2 different ones, one for Smoky Hollow and one from the area by in St. Aug's, like College Park area. So the platform has already been laid. It's just we're not paying attention. My question, and I let you know I just came here tonight to ask this question, is my focus is on what are we doing to build for the generation that is now between the ages of birth and 10, because in 25 years, they will be 25 to 35. They'll be the ones that are working down the jobs down here. They'll be the ones that are doing this. I feel that downtown should be a family-friendly area so that people can come and take the bus into downtown and take the bus home, and so our drivers have safe passengers that they are bringing to and fro. I believe that the amphitheater and the convention center needs to be expanded out in District B at Triangle Town Center, which is almost defunct, because that would create an additional activity center which would bring more revenue into the city to be able to build more affordable housing and pay for our employees. I also believe that the BRT on New Bern should not be built. They need to just put the buses on the road because they're tearing down a whole bunch of trees in one of the hottest areas of the city to put in pavement. And it just absolutely makes no sense to me that you're going to tear down all these trees that were not paid for by the city of Raleigh. It was actually paid for by the CAC. There's a sign out there at the intersection of New Bern and Raleigh Boulevard that says who built it. It was the Rotary Club and one of the CACs. So my question is, what can we do to actually make change that's going to make sense for our younger generation that's going to inhabit and try to fix the messes that are going to be created from what we're doing now? Because if we know most people probably don't realize this, but one of the images that the mayor showed last night showed that downtown Raleigh is already bringing in the most revenue. So we need to expand our activity centers, which under Mitch Silver, there in his comprehensive plan, when he was the planning director, said we should have 6 under the comprehensive plan, and we don't. So can you tell me what we can do to get another activity center built, and we can start planning for the generation that is going to come up and may have totally different ideals than the decision makers right now?
I'm just going to say thank you, Mama Kai. It's good to see you. I haven't seen you for a while. Thanks for always lending your voice to these conversations. It's a really important perspective. The only thing I'll add, because I feel like this goes to both my colleagues more than me, is I think these conversations is where we start. Speaking with the people who will be planning for the future of this community, having you hear from voices of the people who are experiencing the hardships in this community, people who have been experts in the past and those who will come after us, and staying very connected to what's happening on the ground, I think is really a start. So these conversations are important to continue that work, and I'm not sure which colleague wants to address the development.
Mama Kai, it's good to see you. To answer your question, there are 8 growth centers, and the goal over the next 25 years so that your son and others from his generation have housing choices. Prior to 2005, you had 2 choices if you wanted to live in Raleigh. You can buy a suburban home or you can buy a suburban home. That was it. Or if you really wanted to buy a more expensive home downtown, you would pay double the price. Those were the choices. Multi-family housing was not accepted. People were very concerned about renters. And so we had to change the idea that in order to accommodate more people, because some people want to own and some people want to rent, seniors, people with disabilities, young professionals, we wanted to make sure there were housing choices. And so the next iteration is to make sure we have more growth centers that have housing choices and transportation options so that you can decide exactly what kind of lifestyle you have, so you don't have to drive to Johnson County to find some place to live. That is my hope and aspiration for the plan. I had another point for the other one, but that would be my recommendation as we look for the next 20 years in a comprehensive plan, to make sure we have those places and choices for housing and for recreation and for transit, that we build a livable place where people have choices. And in some cases today, they don't have those choices.
Thank you for the question. What I was reflecting on is how long infrastructure takes. And so I think if we don't already know what that project is and we aren't already starting to build it, it's already too late for your son. The horrible thing about infrastructure is it takes decades. The BRT project that I hear that you are not excited about, I'm going to test myself. I'm going to say it's been 20 years in the making. Does that sound about right? Right, you know, from concept, 15 years from concept to design to NEPA to final design to, and it's just been let. It isn't even going to be built and finished and operational. So I think that's why things like tonight are so important. What we're talking about tonight is actually about the next generation. It's the concept of plant a tree. Infrastructure is you're planting a tree for the next generation. When you start an idea, that will not be in operation probably until the next generation. So thank you for what y'all are doing tonight. Thank you for coming and challenging us to think about that, because I do think that we've got to figure out those ideas now, or 10 years from now we'll be sitting here saying we should have thought of that 10 years ago.
Zach just told me I'm the last question, which is a stressful place to be right after Mama Kai. Our kiddos are the same age, so my question is actually almost the same, but comes with a tiny fact check on how our bus system is doing, because I sit as the chair for the Raleigh Transit Authority right now. The questions I'm about to ask are my own, but the bragging is on Go Raleigh. We have record ridership. We are past pre-pandemic levels, and we have record ridership. Next year we will have 2 routes, the one on Capitol Boulevard and the 21 Carolee that goes to the shelters and to Dix Park will run on 10-minute headways. And so I don't think enough people realize that you might see a bus empty sometimes in one neighborhood or another, but we actually have record ridership on our buses, and that's because we invested in transit 10 years ago, to your point about how long infrastructure takes. And so I think a lot about buses, obviously, and housing as well. And my question was around, like, what is your, like, optimistic vision for 10 years from now? Like what conversation will we be able to say, hey, we've made this record or we've done this thing? You know, obviously we'd all like to build as much housing as possible, maybe not all of us, but like house everyone, you know, realistic but optimistic. Do you have a vision for how these things start to play out over the next 10 years?
Yeah, I'll go first, I'll pass it down. So for me, the vision, I'm 28 years in government, so I'm at the tail end of my career. And so for me, it is all about getting the S-line built. The first segment of the S-line from Raleigh to Wake Forest is funded for construction. So 20 years of work has finally put us here. If we can get the last bit of paperwork done at USDOT, then we are prepared to deliver that project and have people riding on that by 2031. And so to take something 20 years and get it to that point is really exciting. And so I think that, I believe expansion of rail in our community of that kind is the first to bring back the future conversations about more rail. I want to see the first leg up so people can see it work and see how many people ride it. And then I think we can come back around to all those other conversations about commuter rail and light rail and all the other things. So that's what I hope to see.
From an affordable housing and homeless service perspective, I would like to see, based on the research that we've recently done around the stock here, that the county continues to look at not just building new, but also holding on to what we do have and preserving the housing that we do have here and making sure it doesn't get flipped, because when something turns 30 years, it needs a new roof, it needs new HVACs, whatever, people sell to get out from under that. Whoever buys it is buying it for a lot, and it's no longer affordable. So my hope is that our local government is focusing on that. I do know that they have created a preservation warning system to help the county do that here in Wake County, so I'm hoping they learn from that and they preserve the units and don't let them turn into non-affordable spaces, as has been happening for many, many years. I'm hoping they continue their trajectory on what they're building and that they are requiring affordability in the way they're allowed to, not by right, but by incentivizing it. So I hope they continue to do that, because that is how you get legally binding affordable housing that lasts for a generation. And I'm hoping that this new focus on delivering a better homeless service system works. I'm hoping that it is informed by community, and I am hoping that it is a robust system that can catch people wherever they fall into homelessness, and hopefully before they hit homelessness. That is my hope for this community.
My vision for 10 years is see a reimagined Capitol Boulevard from downtown to 540. Starting with downtown, this Pigeon House Branch Creek, to have a river walk, have mixed-use housing, accommodate attainable housing. That corridor could probably accommodate 10, maybe 20, 25,000 people, connected by transit, connected by a greenway, going from the north part of the city downtown. And the good thing about it is, because of the nature of the land uses, you're not displacing any residences. You'd have to negotiate with commercial property owners. When you go north of 440, there are struggling shopping centers that half of them are vacant, and house parcels that are dark. And if you follow the model of having housing all the way along, and there's one project just north of 440 on Capitol Boulevard that's doing quite well. Imagine that all the way up as far until you get to kind of the auto zone area, but connect you to Triangle Town Center, which is another great opportunity. I agree with Mama Kai. So to me, I would like to see, as a 10-year vision, that we reimagine Capitol Boulevard that could accommodate so much mixed use, so many new places to live that could be connected by a greenway and transit. And to me, that would be an ideal situation. And it's something that I'm going to keep talking about because I believe that's something that must happen for the future of the city of Raleigh.
My friends, if we could hear it one more time for Mitchell Silver, Lorena Dion McDowell, Julie White, and Gina Stevens coming through tonight to be engaged with all of you and those of you watching from home on how we are growing as a city. I have the privilege of wrapping us up this evening, and I want to just circle back to a question from this audience to the panel, and specifically to an answer offered by our city councilor from the city of Raleigh, Mitchell Silver. There was a comment about, how do we define, how do we identify a successful urban project? And I recall you saying, joy being a part of that. Walking away and feeling a sense of happiness being a part of that. But there's a third piece too. Could you remind us of that third component?
Fun, joy, and happiness. I believe a place, and I come from the Parks Department during COVID, and we noticed that places during COVID that people gravitated to are places that brought joy, fun, and happiness. When I walk downtowns, I watch people. I see their reaction. And if a place does not offer that joy, that fun, that happiness, people aren't going. And so for me, that's very key, whether it's a park, whether it's a downtown, whether it's a restaurant. I always walk and take pictures and see the joy on people's faces. It's very hard to design that into a program. I meet with ULI and they're going about all these different, I said, excuse me, but what about the joy, fun, and happiness? How do you build that into your program? And the woman said, you know something? You're absolutely right. That's what people are gravitating to, and so that's my hope for downtown, for North Hills, to all these growth centers, for our parks, for our rec centers. We have to focus on bringing that because in all the mental health pain that we've gone through the past decade, joy has healing power, happiness has healing power, laughter is therapeutic to the soul. And so my goal is how do we build that into our places and spaces to make this a better place to live?
Can we have a round of applause on that one? It is a privilege to wrap up here over the course of 2 or 3 minutes with all of you, because I am standing, and for those of you who may not know, I mean, frankly, it's really irrelevant, but, my name is Nick Neptune, okay? And I've had the great privilege of working with our friends at In Situ Studio, of organizing and facilitating, right, these public talks on how we are growing and developing a city for the last 4 or 5 years now. And here we are tonight, we're engaged in this conversation. And what's wild to me is that over that time, I moved here to this city as Mitchell Silver, okay, was wrapping up his tenure as planning director. I moved here, 10, 15 years ago. And as he's wrapping up his tenure as planning director, facilitating our new comprehensive plan for the city, with an eye toward more of us having access, not just to, affordable housing, not just to improved transportation, but to more of these, destinations, these urban projects filled with, fun, joy, happiness. I have been living that out as a young, we have students here tonight, students in architecture, students in practice who are learning, listening. I was just like you just 10 years ago coming into this. And in my mind, I thought to myself, how can I get involved? How can I get engaged in building, right, just like a better neighborhoods, a better city? 10 years ago, this man was at the lead in facilitating that environment. 10 years later, okay, just like you, I want to be very clear about this. 10 years later, you're talking to a guy here, right, who came in working in the music scene, joy, fun, happiness, okay, I mean literally DJing parties at the park, okay, showing up at Neptune's Parlor, having a good time, right? 10 years, 15 years later, now serving on Raleigh's Planning Commission, now working directly with colleagues on council, working directly with Gina Stevens, the publisher of Raleigh Magazine, working directly with our architects and our designers and our urban planners. What I'm trying to say to you is this is real. What we're talking about has real implications. I am living it out in real time. I too am a renter, okay, just trying to survive and thrive in our community right there with you. In other words, what I'm trying to bring home for us as we're wrapping up, 2 to 3 minutes, this is going to be 2 or 3 minutes. Look, I just heard the godfather of our Raleigh Greenways, Chuck Flink, talk about this the other day. Chuck said, you know what, for all the problems we have, for all the doom and gloom, and I think that's the thing, it can feel very doom and gloom, especially right now. I mean, you look on your phone, you look at the news, I don't know, something happened over here. You look out there, and it can feel very doom and gloom. Look, at the end of the day, the truth of it is, we got us. We got each other. We have our community. And frankly, we have a history from the capital city of Raleigh, North Carolina, all throughout this state, back to 1792, when we were just getting this thing started. We're planners, through and through. We're hardwired to think about what's next. You might be saying, Neptune, what are you talking about? Let me tell you what I'm talking about. We were investing in higher education back in 1789, 1792, opening up the nation's first public university, UNC Chapel Hill, right down the street, which gave birth to NC State. Go Wolfpack. I see you. I see you. I see you. God bless that School of Architecture, that School of Design. Thank you for your work. From 1792 to present day, you look at the 1960s and 70s as we're building the Research Triangle Park together as a community. That was planning. That was foresight. Now look, we realize today, I don't want to drive around all the time. Thank you, Julie White. Literally, the Deputy Secretary of NC Department of Transportation working across the state to improve our options, to improve our connectivity, walking, biking, just other options to get around our communities. This woman is up on this stage right now, working side by side with a woman who's working nationwide, but who for many years is working across this county to improve access and affordability for you to have a place to live. Right next to the guy who literally created the freaking space in which we're having a conversation. Y'all, this is real. Meanwhile, we've got Gina Stevens who's trying to give this a voice, give this a story, give this a narrative to help us understand the facts as to what's going on. And now we got you, the freaking future in our faces. I see you, I see you. Many thanks to our friends from In Situ Studio, Myriad Media, all the architecture firms and partners who help us get together. But what I just want to offer, we should feel encouraged by tonight's conversation. I get it. Sometimes it takes time, right? It takes time. Planning, developing, executing on these ideas. But guess what? Just like it was acknowledged on the stage, it starts here. It starts with us having a conversation. And regardless of what's happening globally and around the world, which again, I know, it's like doom and gloom, bring it back home. Focus on what you can do in your backyard, with your work, with your studies. Literally, you are building out the future. I've got kids out here. I see Bo. I see you, Bo. This is the future over here. I see Bo over here. Bo Reinhardt. This is the future. This kid, he's like not even, 10 years old? How old are you, Bo? Eight years old. The future is in the audience. This man is showing up to a panel on how we're growing and developing as a city. We've got, I think it's Emily Wickham and Mary Anderson from London participating in tonight's conversation. They're giving a talk on what they're doing on, I think, July 31st, just a few days from now. Y'all, look at us. Come on now. I think there's reason to feel encouraged and hopeful about what we are doing in our backyard. So with all this to say, one more round of applause and thanks for our panel tonight. Thanks to all of you for showing up this evening, choosing to get off your phones, off your couches, out of your houses, and here to Junction West. Many thanks to our friends from Junction West. Many thanks to our friends from the Moon Room. Again, an example of Mitchell Silver's work. Fast forward 10, 15 years later, we have a jazz club in Smoky Hollow District where you can have fun, joy, okay, happiness at the jazz club, and you can have conversations about how we're growing and developing as a city too. Because it doesn't happen just in structured environments like this. It happens when we're off the clock. It happens when we're just hanging out. In all seriousness, God bless you. And I see you, City Builder. I see you, Jen Truman, literally the chair of Raleigh Transit Authority. God bless this woman, City Builder, trying to advance good housing policy. Make some noise for City Builder.
Yeah.
All right, I got to get out of here. I know it's time to wrap this up. I told you 3 to 5 minutes. It's been like 10. I get you. I see you. I hear you. But the thing is, I have so much respect and love and appreciation for you because I'm right there with you. I've been living this with you. Look, I'm born and raised North Carolina through and through. And right now we're here in the capital city, and we have an opportunity to lead and to demonstrate with our creativity, our thoughtfulness, what we're doing. So let's come back on Wednesday night, if I'm not mistaken. Wednesday night, David Hill and the rest of the crew to continue this conversation right here at Junction West. Thank you. God bless you. Have a great night. Woo.